What's up YouTube, I'm EVscape and welcome back to another video. Today, I don't know, I feel like this is going to be a bit controversial, even though like the math involved in the video is like spot on. I feel like people are just going to get annoyed at me anyway. It seems to happen with these sorts of videos, but I just want to make it very clear before we jump in. I'm not bashing on PKers that pray the wrong thing or only pray one thing or use certain attack styles and don't use other attack styles. I'm bashing on the way that the combat system works. This is not an attack on any particular sort of PK. This is an attack on the combat system in old school RuneScape and how fucked up it is. So before you leave a comment saying that I fucking hate you and you're a dumb cunt, just try and watch the whole video through and try and understand what I'm saying. That being said, boys, let's go ahead and crack on into day 127, I think. Have you ever been out PKing and thought to yourself something along the lines of, what the fuck? How did I splash there? How have I splashed 7 times in a row on a guy who's running away from me? Or maybe something along the lines of, he is literally bolt ragging and out DPSing me in Tribrid. Or maybe even something along the lines of, Mage is literally fucking useless. What is the point of even bringing it? Well, I can tell you, guaranteed 100%, at least 50% of people that go PK have this problem. Think these thoughts, myself included. So today what we're going to do is take a bit of a deep dive into the magic skill and how it works in combat and why it literally is useless. Alright, maybe not useless. Obviously there's some niche uses for magic, but you know, I mean, for the most part, it's just not as good as the rest of the combat triangle. Now, before we can get into why magic is effectively useless in PvP, we first need to discuss how the combat system in old school RuneScape works. You would think that it would just be as simple as rolling your attack level against the monster's defense level, but of course you have to take into consideration all of your equipment bonuses. So, let's take a look at how the rolls are calculated by pitting my hardcore Iron Man up against this Hellhound. So in order to figure out how often you are going to hit against the Hellhound, your attack roll must be put up against the Hellhound's defense roll. Now, your attack roll is calculated by taking your effective attack level and multiplying that by your equipment bonus plus 64. Now, in this case, our effective attack level is calculated by taking our visible attack level, being 67, plus a regular attack potion taking it up to 76, multiplying that by the prayer bonus. In this case, we're using incredible reflexes. So the prayer bonus is 15%. We take that 76, multiply it by 1.15, and round it down to the nearest integer, which happens to be 87. After that, for some strange reason, you add 8, which takes our effective attack level up to 95. From there, we have to multiply 95 by our equipment bonus, which is 104 plus 64, once again, for some strange reason, I don't know. All this comes out to be a maximum roll of 15,960 for your attack. Now, of course, we have to pit that against the Hellhound's defense roll. Now, we calculate the Hellhound's defense roll in the same way by taking their effective defense level and putting that up against their equipment bonus plus 64. Now, of course, in this case, the Hellhound doesn't have prayer adjustments and does not have equipment bonuses. So we basically just take its defense level plus 8, which gives us our effective defense level, and multiply that by the 64, which is a 0 equipment bonus plus 64. This comes out to a maximum roll of 7,040. Now, to figure out our accuracy against the Hellhound, all we need to do is do a simple calculation, which is 1 minus the defense roll of the Hellhound, which is 7,040, plus 2, divided by 2 times the attack plus 1, the attack being 15,960. Now, the answer to this equation comes out to be 0.7793, or in percentage terms, a 77.93% accuracy. Now, in order to figure out the average hit on this Hellhound, what we have to do is take our maximum hit, which is 29, divide that by 2, because when you roll a hit, you will hit anywhere between 0 and your maximum, meaning you can have a positive accuracy roll and still hit a 0. So our average hit would be our max hit divided by 2 for the times that we do hit. And then of course, we're not always going to hit. So we have to multiply that by the accuracy percentage, which is 77.93. This comes out to an average hit of 11.3 every time we hit the Hellhound. Now, the Dragon's Scimitar hits on a 4-tick cycle, meaning if we want to know the damage per second, we have to take our number 11.3 and divide that by the amount of seconds every time we get the hit, which is 2.4. This comes out to be a 4.708 damage per second. Now, I'm sure at this point you're all thinking, right, shut the fuck up, Jake. We know you're dumb as fuck. There's absolutely no way that could possibly be right. You don't even know how to do math. Well, luckily for you guys, I decided I would run those numbers through Bitterkoji's DPS calculator because that man is a genius and he knows what he's talking about. And lo and behold, the numbers that I got matched up to his numbers almost perfectly. Now, you might also be thinking, okay, Jake, if there's a spreadsheet on DPS, why on earth do you need to do the calculations by yourself? Wouldn't it just be smarter to use his calculations and save yourself the time? Well, unfortunately for us, the way that Magic works against another player is completely different to how Magic works against another NPC. Against an NPC, the calculation is rolled based off the opponent's Magic level and their Magic equipment bonus. However, against a player, it's rolled against their Magic level and their defense level and their equipment bonus. So in order to show that in certain parts of PvP, Mage is useless, I'm going to have to do the calculations myself. So naturally, I went on an adventure to the Grand Exchange to get myself some gear setups for different kinds of Tribrid PKing. First one that we're going to go over is Welfare PKing. So this is the setup I went with for our Welfare Mage. Obviously, you got your Zaretian robes, your normal cape because you're not going to get that back, Unholy Book because a shield costs too much money, a normal glory, mystic boots, splashing out with the Barrow's gloves, and a water stick. And for our Welfare range setup, we've got the regular black D-hide, a normal rune crossbow with dragonstone bolts, and an Arva's accumulator because bolts cost a lot of money and we don't want to lose them. So for this first setup, I'll quickly run you through the calculation so I can explain how Magic works. The Magic attack bonus is calculated by obviously our Magic level multiplied by our prayer bonus, which is the 1.25 from Augury, and then you multiply that effective attack level by our Magic bonus. So as explained in the beginning, our Magic max roll will be calculated the same way as we would with our attack roll. We take our visible Magic level, which will be 99. We multiply that by our prayer adjustment, which is a 1.25 from Augury. This gives us a 123.75, rounding that down to a 123. We add our stance bonus, which we can't do for Magic because our stance bonus doesn't count. And then we add all that up and plus 8. This gives us an effective attack level of 131. We then have to go ahead and multiply that by our equipment bonus, which as we can see here is 67 plus 64, giving us 131. 131 multiplied by 131. So our max roll for Magic is going to be 17,161. Now here's where things get a little bit tricky. In order to calculate our Magic defense roll, we have to take our effective defense level and take 30% of that and add that to 70% of our effective Magic level. Now, because most of the time in a Brid fight, you're going to be brewed up, you're going to have 120 defense visible in the defensive bonuses. We then multiply that by the prayer adjustment, which would be 1.25 because we're in our range gear and using rigor. That comes out to be a 150 defense. We have no stance bonus because we'll be on rapid and we don't get a defensive stance bonus from rapid. Then we take the 150 and add 8. This gives us a 158 effective defense level, and we multiply that by 0.3 to get 30% of our effective defense level. This comes out to be a 47.5. 44. Rounding that down, we get a 47. We then take our visible magic level, which is going to be 99, and we multiply that by our prayer adjustment, which is going to be nothing in this case because we'll be in our range gear and using rigor. We take our 99 magic, we multiply that by 0.7, and we get a 69. Adding that onto the 47 that we got from our defense roll, this comes out to be an effective magic defense of 116. We then have to multiply that by our magic defense bonus, which is a 97 defense bonus in our hides, plus 64, coming out to 161 multiplied by 116, giving us a magic defense roll of 18,676. Now, just like in the first clip, in order to figure out our accuracy in our magic gear up against this defensive gear, we have to do a simple calculation. This time, because the attack roll is lower than the defense, we have to take the attack, which is 17,161, divide that by 2 times the defense, which is 18,676, plus 1, and that comes out to a 0.459, also known as a 45.9% accuracy. Now, of course, you're not always going to be in your hides when you get maged. Sometimes you're going to be in your robes. I mean, maybe after you watch this video, you won't be in your robes, but sometimes you will be in your robes. We have a 52 magic defense in our robes. So using the same calculation up against someone in budget robes using a magic attack, you will have a 61.1% magic accuracy. So we have a 45.9% magic accuracy on the hides. We have a 61.1% magic accuracy on the robes. Now we have to figure out the range calculations. Here's one I prepared earlier. The range accuracy on hides is a 53.8% and the range accuracy on robes is a 74.2%. Now, here's where things are going to get interesting. If you don't know, if you're praying a certain protection prayer and you are attacked by that attack style, for instance, you're praying ranged and you're attacked by a ranged hit, the damage that that ranged hit will do is deducted by 40% because you are praying the right protection prayer. That's why in No Honor Fights, you change your prayer style to the attack style that your opponent is using. Now, if we take our max magic hit of 30 and consider the fact that our opponent is in hides and every time we hit them, we're going to hit between 0 and our max hit, our average hit on our opponent is 15. We then multiply that by the 45.9% chance that we will actually hit a number. That comes out to be an average hit of 6.88. If we then do the same calculation against our opponent that is in robes, the average hit comes out to be 9.16. Now, of course, if we're praying magic and our opponent attacks us, the damage that they deal will be reduced by 40%. So they have a maximum hit of 30 and their damage will be reduced by 40%, which then gives them a maximum hit in magic of 18. Of course, they're only going to average half of that when they hit us, which comes out to be a 9 average hit. Multiplying that by the 45.9% chance that they have to actually hit us, and their average hit against us, if we're praying mage in hides, is a 4.13. And of course, the same thing goes when we're in robes and praying mage. The average hit would be a 5.5. Now, with 99 ranged and the gear setup that we have with the Dragonstone Bolts E, the maximum hit that can be dealt is a 41. Now, considering the fact that when our opponent hits us, they're only going to hit half of that on average, that comes out to be a 20.5 average hit with range. Multiplying that by the accuracy, which was 53.8% chance of hitting with ranged, the average hit with range on hides is 11.0. With the same things in consideration, when we're in robes, the average hit will be a 15.21. Now, of course, if we have our prey range up, they lose a 40% damage, which takes their max hit down to be a 24 on the nose. Dividing that by 2 for their average hit, they have an average hit of 12 on prey range. Multiplying that by the accuracy on the hides, we get a 53.8%, coming out to an average hit of 6.45. Same deal with the robes, coming out to an 8.9 average hit on robes with range. So what does this all mean? What it means essentially is, if I'm in my ranged gear, as in my hides, and I am praying ranged, the average magic hit from my opponent will be a 6.88. And the average ranged hit from my opponent will be a 6.45. So even though I'm praying the wrong prayer, the average damage my opponent will do to me hitting me off prayer with magic is only 0.43 damage per hit higher than if they were to hit me with ranged on my ranged prayer. Whereas if I was praying magic and my opponent hit me with ranged, I would take an 11 damage, which is 4.12 damage higher. Now, if we take that 4.12 damage that we would get hit if we got hit by a ranged hit off prayer and multiply that by the 0.43 damage that we take extra every time we get hit off prayer with magic, that means we could get hit off prayer with magic 9.6 times compared to being hit off prayer with ranged once. And it's the same deal if you're in robes as well. With an average magic on robes with a range prayer up being a 9.16 and the average range on robes being an 8.9, that's only a 0.26 difference. And that's compared to the 3.05 if you get caught the other way. Meaning that if you're in robes, it's 11.7 hits difference between praying range and praying mage and getting caught off prayer. Now you might be thinking, okay Jake, yeah, that is pretty ridiculous, but if I do get my mage prayer on in time, that's going to reduce the amount of damage that I take, and if I get it correct, I'm going to have the upper hand in the fight, which is fair enough. If you are a perfect PKer and you can get it right every single time, then pray mage is very useful. However, if you get it wrong 1 in 9.5 times, if you get the wrong prayer 11% of the time, it's literally not worth changing. And on top of that, if you just camp your range in ranged prayer, while your opponent is maging you in their robes, they're going to be doing on average a 6.88 damage, and back to them, you are going to be doing an 8.9 damage because you are ranging them in their robes when they have Prey range up. They are maging you in your hides with Prey range up. Meaning, if this is an Outlast fight, every single hit when you don't change your prayer, you do an extra 2 damage to them on average. So in a perfect world, if you can hit every single prayer every single time in a welfare fight, which, let's be honest, if you're in a welfare fight, you're probably not going out PKing in welfare being a perfect PKer. If you can hit it every single time, sure, you can change your prayer. If you can't hit it 90% of the time, 89% of the time, get the prayer right, it's literally not worth changing your prayer, and you should just stay on prayer range until they go in for the spec or a melee. Okay, now that I've showed you guys the calculations that are involved, I'm not going to go over the calculations again. I'm just going to tell you guys the average hits with each different attack style compared to the other attack style with the different setups. So this is the medium setup that I've gone with. As you can see, we're now in Mystics with an Occult necklace and an Aram's staff. The Occult is a bit questionable as to whether you would actually take the Occult risk. I think most people wouldn't, but we're going to chuck the Occult on just for the sake of this. Obviously, if you didn't have the Occult, it would be much worse because you lose out on a 10% bonus. We have the Aram Staff for the extra bonuses, and of course, we now have the Spirit Shield for the extra defensive bonuses as well. On top of that, we now have the Imbued Magic Cape, because I think if you're going to go out in this gear, you probably want to take the Imbued Cape, which also gives us some extra magic damage bonus. As for the range setup, we still have the Black D hide. However, we decided to scrap the Arva's Accumulator because you really don't need the Arva's. Bolts aren't that expensive, and it's not going to hurt you that much losing them, and the range bonus it gives you is pretty negligible anyway. Other than that, there is no change except for the Spirit Shield for the welfare and the medium level setup for range. Let's get into the calculations. Now here's where things heat up. And I know it sounds like in this video I'm just bashing on using magic, but I am a huge advocate for actually using magic and it actually being useful, which, as I'll explain as we get further along in this video, there's just not a whole lot of places that it is useful. However, maxed mains is a place where magic is useful. Moving into the medium setup for Tribred fights, the average magic on your hides will be an 8.72, magic on robes will be a 10.19. The average range on hides will be a 9.52, and the average range on robes will be a 13.55. So, as you can see, range does still hit more. However, that being said, this is where the protection prayers will actually become useful. Because if you're praying range on hides, the average hit will be a 5.58 with range, as opposed to the 8.72 with mage. So, it is actually useful to change to your pray mage because the average hit on your hides will be a 4.87. Same deal in your robes, the average hit will be a 7.93 with range, and a 10.19 with magic. This is of course due to the fact that you have the magic damage boosting of the Aram staff and the occult necklace. If you didn't have the magic damage boosting, it would not be worth changing. So what this means is if you do get hit off prayer with range, you do take the 9.52 damage. If you get hit off prayer with mage, you take the 8.72 damage. If you do have your pray range on, you'll take the 5.58 damage. What this means essentially is if you can get the prayer correct 25% of the time, then it's worth switching. Now, all this changes if you're in your robes. If you're in your robes, you need to hit your prayer right 65% of the time for it to be worth praying mage. If you can't get your prayer right 65% of the time in robes, when you switch to your robes, you're much better off just praying range. So the skill level required to be a good PKer in a tribrid fight is increasing as the gear gets better. Let's move on to the max gear setup. Now for the max mage, we've upgraded to the Staff of Light, which gives us an extra 10% damage boost, as well as some Aram's robes. And for our range setup, we've now upgraded to a dragon crossbow with the opal dragon bolts, as well as a Carol's leather top and a fury. We've also gone with the Verix plate skirt because when you're PKing in this gear, most people like to take some tank legs. Now, the max gear setup is where things get interesting. The average magic hit on hides is going to be a 10.73, with the average magic hit on robes being a 10.9. Whereas the average magic hit on hides with Prayer Mage is a 6, and on robes with Prayer Mage, it's a 6.3. Now, the average range on the hides, because the range defensive bonus is so high, the average ranged hit is now a 6.72. The average range hit on robes is a 12.92, and on hides with Prey range, it's a 4. On robes with a Prey range, it is 7.69. Now, what does this mean? This essentially means the roles are quite literally reversed. In this specific gear setup, if you sit in your hides and Prey Mage, you will take a 6 damage on average from a Mage hit and a 6.72 damage on average from a ranged hit. Whereas if you Prey Range, you will take a 10.37 damage on average from a mage hit. Meaning if you just sit in your range gear and pray mage, 5 range hits, yes, 5 range hits makes up the difference between that and 1 off prayer magic hit. Meaning if you get your prayers right 80% of the time, it is worth changing from pray mage. If you can't get your prayer right 80% of the time, you're much better off in the fight to just sit there in your range gear with your Prey Magic up. Now, because there's such a massive difference in damage between magic on robes and magic on hides, ranged on robes and ranged on hides, that's where gear switches and hitting your prayers correctly becomes a massive part of the fight. You need to be getting your gear right and you need to be getting your prayers right, with an emphasis on getting your gear correct first. What this means is, holy shit, if you're PKing in max gear against someone else in max gear, there's actually some form of skill involved. You do actually have to get the correct prayers and you do actually have to get the correct gear. There will be a direct correlation between skill level and who wins the fight, compared to if you're in welfare gear. You can literally just sit there and pray ranged with your ranged up, and you will win the fight more often than your opponent will. Right, I think we've sucked the dick of Mage actually being good for a little too long at this point. Now it's time to move on to some different builds and different gear setups. Now we're going to skip over med levels because med levels are essentially the same as maxed mains, just obviously the magic and range get a little bit closer together because your defense is a little bit lower. We're going to skip straight onto the Zerker accounts, and this is the setup we're going with for the Zerker accounts. Now, with this setup, your average magic hit on hides is going to be a 10.61, and your average range hit on hides is going to be a 15.92, with your average hit on prey range being a 9.32, meaning there's a 1.29 damage difference between range on range prayer and mage on range prayer. Which means you would need to get your prayer correct 76% of the time for it to be worth you changing. Meaning if just 1 in 4 times your opponent manages to hit you with a bolt off prey range, while you're in your hides, not even while you're in your robes, it's not worth changing your prayers. Now, of course, if we upgrade to this gear using the Staff of Light as well as the Occult Necklace, our max hit is going to go up to a 38, meaning the average hit on hides will be an 11.52. Now, this is a 2.2 difference as opposed to the 4.41 difference between the range on hides and the magic on hides, meaning if you are up against a Staff of Light, you have to get your prayers correct 50% of the time for it to be worth changing. So more than likely, you're going to get your prayers right 50% of the time, and it's definitely worth changing your prayers up against max gear in a Zerker. Once again, 75% of the time if you're up against an Aram staff. We're not going to look at a welfare setup for a Zerker because obviously it's just going to get worse and worse and worse as your defense gets lower. Okay, moving on to pures, and this is the mage setup we're going with for a 60 attack pure. And this is the range setup we're going with for the 60 attack pure. Obviously, we don't have the Arvas in this. You can choose to take the Arvas, but like I said, bolts aren't super expensive these days. Probably not worth taking. On top of that, we went the combat bracelet instead of mithril gloves because the combat bracelet is better than mithril gloves. Now, with this gear setup on a 60 attack pure is where things genuinely get fucked up. The average magic hit on hides on a pure with this setup is an 11.91. With mage prey up, it would be a 6.86. The average ranged hit on the same gear is a 20.36, and the average range hit with prey ranged up is an 11.92. That means the average ranged hit on prey ranged is higher than the average mage hit on prey range. And what that means is you would literally have to get your prayer correct every single time to even bother switching from prey range to prey mage in a hybrid outlast fight. You literally do more damage on a pure with a ranged hit if your opponent is praying ranged than you would with a mage hit if your opponent is praying ranged. Is that not just fucking insane? Now, all of this takes into consideration the fact that you have an occult necklace. If you don't have an occult necklace, this gets so much worse. Your average hit goes down from a 16.5 to a 15, and considering the accuracy is 72.2%, your average hit goes down to a 10.83, meaning the average range hit would be over 1 damage more on prey range. So basically, this means if you go PKing on a 60 attack pure, it is literally useless unless you are perfect to change your prayer from prey range. I know personally when I go pure PKing and I see someone that is constantly praying range, no matter how many times I mage them in a row, they just constantly pray range. And I sit there and I'm like, you fucking idiot, just pray mage. It turns out this entire time, that is the correct thing to do. Now, for the last calculation, here is the gear setup. A 75 attack pure in absolute maximum mage. And for the range setup, pretty much absolute maximum range. Dragon crossbow, opal bolts, fury, and of course the regen bracelet. Now with this setup, your average magic hit will be a 13.69 without prey mage, and with prey mage a 7.92. Your average range hit will be a 20.85 and on prey range a 12.41. So there is a 1.28 difference between the ranged hit on prey range and the mage hit on prey range. Meaning that if you miss 1 in 5.6 prayers, it's literally not worth changing your prayer. I think you'd have to be a pretty fucking good PKer to not miss a prayer 1 in 5.6 times. Now keep in mind again guys, this is up against absolute max mage. If they come out with just the staff, no occult, the average hit goes down to a 12.6, meaning that if you get the prayer wrong, 1 in like 40 times, it's not worth changing. So if you're PKing on a pure, it is pretty much never worth changing your prayer to mage, and that is fucking ridiculous. This is why you can literally just sit there and bolt rag someone with their prey range up, with your prey range up, and you will out DPS them even if they're maging you. Now personally, I think the solution to this is pretty simple and pretty obvious. Rather than the magic defense of a player being rolled off their magic level and their defense level combined, just make it roll off their defense level. I'm no genius, but I'm pretty sure if it only rolled off the defense level, all of the problems would be solved. If you got high defense on a main account, obviously mage isn't going to do as much damage to you because you have a high defense level. That's the way it should work. If you're on a level 1 defense account and your defense is based off your magic level, which is going to be very high, that's essentially like saying you have a 1 defense account with a very high defense level when it comes to magic. So many people these days will say things like, we need to buff the normal spellbook. We need to nerf Black Dragonhide. This would not be a problem if the defense didn't roll off the magic level and instead just rolled off the defense level. Anyway, guys, that is enough of a rant from me. Even if you don't take away from this video that mage is broken, at least you now have some information about PKing on a pure, PKing on a Zerka, PKing on a maxed main in welfare, and all the other accounts in between. I hope you guys can take something away from this video, and hopefully in the future, magic in PvP is fixed. But that is going to wrap it up for me. If you did enjoy the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. See you guys tomorrow. Take it easy. Yo, thank you guys so much for watching today's episode in EV365. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'm putting out a new video every single day this year. Don't forget to click that bell icon as well so you get notified when it comes out. If you guys really enjoyed a video, you could also leave a like. That really helps out the channel to get the videos in suggested, and it's really good for channel growth. On top of that, if you are enjoying the videos and want to see some of these things get made live as they happen, I stream 5 days a week over on Twitch. Crazy stuff like this goes down very often. Boys!
Oh no, I know that noise. Oh, you have two!
I'm safe,
oh,
I'm safe, I'm safe.
How much cash is that?
124 mil. Holy fuck. Muscles.
Hey, disgusting.
Did you just fart?
Disgusting.
And if you just want to keep up with my day-to-day wheelings and dealings, you can also follow me over on Twitter at EVscapeOfficial. All links will be in the description down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video tomorrow. Take it easy. Oh my god, I bet you got killed by a fucking bear. Oh my god.